this is the place to do it. Hey, travel reporter John Bartell here. You're watching Bartell's Backroads, where the road is often sometimes part of the adventure. In this episode, we're going to be cruising across California, taking you on some unusual guided tours. First stop, we're going to head to Monterey County to ride the coastal rails on an old-fashioned handcar. When early railroad maintenance workers needed to make repairs on train tracks, they hitched a ride on handcars. And when modern-day tourists want to experience the breathtaking views of the Monterey County coast, they also hitch a ride on handcars. All right, looks like, hey, now we're going downhill.
Yeah, but much easier.
There we go. Situated along the Four-Door Dunes in Marina, California, is the Handcar Tours, a unique tourist attraction created by co-owner Mason Clark.
But this is a lot like what the men used to travel along when they would build and maintain the railroads in the 18 and early 1900s. So definitely a real historic type vehicle.
Although similar to the handcars of the 1800s, these modern-day handcars are equipped with electric assist motors that help you up the inclines of the sand dunes.
So we're actually climbing a sand dune right here. When this track was built, they built it up and over every sand dune. They didn't do a lot of excavating or grading because it's really old. So we're actually climbing one of the Four-Door Dunes.
The 6-mile handcar tour takes you along the historic Monterey branch line, which was built in 1874 by David Jacks, who was not only a real estate mogul and railroad baron, but also was credited with popularizing a famous cheese.
It was built by a man named David Jacks, the founder of the Monterey Jack Cheese Company.
The Monterey branch line brought great prosperity to Monterey County and David Jacks.
This railway is what allowed Monterey to develop into the flourishing economy we see today. Before the railway, there was nothing here.
Passenger and freight trains ceased operations in the 1990s. The track lay dormant until Mason and his dad Todd opened up the handcar tours in 2021.
I had a passion for handcars. When I was 13, I got into handcars. Not these, but like the ones you talked about in the TV shows. I used to build replicas, and I sold those all over the world.
Not only did Mason build replica handcars, he also built the handcars used on the tour today.
So I'm a mechanical engineer. When I was in college, I started developing the very car we're on. It was about a 3-year process.
A big part of Mason's business was actually to teach people about the history of handcars.
Between 1879 and about 1900, they were very common. And then 1910 is when the combustion engine started taking over.
Mason and his dad actually started one of the only museums dedicated to handcars.
So this is called a velocipede. It's a 3-wheel handcar. And how this one works is you would have 2 people, one on this side and one on this side.
There are many ways to experience Monterey County's coast.
As we get up to the top, the summit, we're going to have some pine forest we're going to go through, Monterey pines, and then we're going to see a sweeping view of the bay out there.
But from the Monterey branch line, both beauty and history collide. Old rail cars, whistles, and a little gold rush history roll together at this railroad stop. The Nevada County Narrow Gauge Railroad Museum lets you hop aboard a historic rail bus and ride the tracks back in time. When you think of railroads, you might think of trains, steam engines, and boxcars.
Okay, go!
And here at the Nevada County Narrow Gauge Railroad Museum, they do have all of that. Plus, this thing.
More hope!
What are we on right now? What is this thing?
This is a rail bus that we're on right now. We can carry 20 people.
Rail buses are pretty much what they sound like. They're gasoline-powered buses with railroad wheels on them. And they're pretty rare, according to docent Specs Lanham.
Absolutely old school, and these kind of conveyances were all built by the chief mechanics in the respective railroad shops. There was not a place you went to buy these.
Rail buses were not usually built to run on larger standard gauge railroads with freight trains. They were generally built to run on smaller tracks called narrow gauge railroads that linked small towns or logging camps to larger main railroads.
And so the Nevada County narrow gauge was built to move gold, timber, agriculture, and people down to Colfax from Nevada City and Grass Valley.
Back in the day, Nevada County was industrious, but difficult to get to because of the mountains, and you'll get to experience that on the museum's tour.
And we're going to back up into the meadow doing a maneuver called a switchback, which is how you climb up a mountain. You go forward, back, because you can't go straight over.
The area became much more accessible when brothers John and Edward Coleman invested in the narrow gauge tracks because, unlike standard gauge, it could be built on sharp corners and steep hills.
John Kidder was actually a civil engineer who built the Nevada County narrow gauge. And then the Coleman brothers wanted to get out of the business, so they sold it to John and Sarah Kidder.
Fun fact, after John Kidder died, Sarah Kidder became the first woman to actually own and operate a railroad, and this all happened before it was legal for women to vote.
She took over. She was in the office. She paid the dividends. She did the scheduling. She ran the railroad till 1913.
These days, the Nevada County Narrow Gauge Railroad Museum keeps the small track heritage alive by restoring some of the last remaining narrow gauge locomotives. What are we on now?
We're on engine number 5, an 1875 Baldwin locomotive.
Tim O'Brien is the vice director of the museum and says engine number 5 started out as a logging locomotive near Lake Tahoe, but then it became a movie star. How many movies has it been in?
We figured about 26, 28 of them.
One of engine number 5's most famous scenes was in an early John Wayne movie called The Spoilers.
In the movie The Spoilers, they commandeered the train from the operators, and John Wayne was running it, and the other guys were firing rifles out the cab, and they ran it through a big wall and overturned the whole thing.
Hollywood used engine number 5 from the 1940s to the 1970s because narrow gauge tracks were easier to move around to different set locations. After it retired in the 1980s, the museum acquired it and gave the engine a makeover and joined the rail bus as an ambassador for narrow gauge history. Hooves on cobblestones and Victorian homes set the scene for a ride through another era. A horse-drawn carriage tour through Eureka rolls you past colorful mansions and stories from this historic North Coast town. Eureka has a very walking-friendly downtown, but if you ask me, the best way to experience the Victorian-era buildings is on a horse-drawn carriage.
Old Town Eureka is an historic district which is on the National Register.
Brendan Furion owns Old Town Carriage Co., and he and his horse Pearl give historical tours of Eureka.
They're not built for speed. She ain't gonna win you the Kentucky Derby, but she's as safe as houses.
Slow and steady, that's the best way to admire the fine detail and craftsmanship of these well-kept buildings, many of which are true Victorian homes built before 1901.
These are all Victorians because they were built under the reign of Queen Victoria.
Many of the structures are more than 100 years old, and the reason they haven't rotted away is because they're made of redwood.
Weevils, woodlice, do not like redwood. They just won't eat it.
There are many fine examples of Victorian buildings, but by far the most iconic Victorian in Eureka is the William Carson Mansion.
He rose to become Eureka's wealthiest citizen and possibly one of the wealthiest men in Northern California. And he made his money out of milling redwood.
Prior to the gold rush in 1849, a dense 400-mile-long redwood forest covered Northern California's coast. But as the need for lumber in San Francisco grew, loggers clear-cut much of the old-growth trees. William Carson and much of Eureka prospered from selling that wood, and they built many of the buildings you see today. There's very little logging going on these days. Tourism and art are a big draw to Eureka. You'll find more than 120 murals all over town.
The Eureka is in the top 10 mural towns in the entire country.
Come during Memorial Day weekend, and you can watch the Kinetic Race, a 4-day endurance competition where artists maneuver odd human-powered vehicles over road, sand, and water. Whether you're staying the night or just passing through, there's a lot to do in the historic Victorian seaport. Snowy trails and mountain air set the stage for a winter ride that's anything but ordinary. A fat tire snow bike tour in Truckee lets you glide across the snow with 2 wheels and a whole lot of backroads adventure. The little mountain town of Truckee has over 30 miles of paved biking trails. It's one of the most popular places for cyclists to go in Nevada County. There's just one problem though. In the winter, those bike trails are covered in snow. The solution to that problem is fat tire biking.
They're perfect for that, going through different types of terrain, mud, snow, sand, things that you would struggle on a regular size tire.
Rachel and Dennis Elstey own Bike Truckee, one of the only bike rental shops in the area that can operate year-round.
Previous to the fat tire bikes, what was the biking business like in the winter here?
In the winter, it was non-existent.
The obvious feature of fat tire biking is, of course, the fat tire itself, which acts sort of like a balloon in the snow.
Well, we have these big 4.0 tires. We keep them a little bit soft so that they really can absorb all of the different undulations and things with the terrain that we're on, the different snow and everything.
The mountain biking industry has been slowly developing the fat tire bike for over a decade, but if you ask me, the greatest advancement is the addition of the electric assist motors.
These are called a power assist rather than a throttle style electric bike, where you have to put energy in to get the energy out.
A great beginner trail that Rachel and Dennis like to send riders on is the Sawtooth Recreation Area, which takes you high above the town of Truckee and through a tree-covered portion of the Tahoe National Forest.
The Sawtooth Trail is an extensive trail network. It connects Tahoe City and also to Kings Beach, so it's this big open space.
Fat tire biking is definitely fun, but the true experience, in my opinion, is the sights that you'll see and the feeling you'll get while pedaling through the area free from crowds of people.
There's a lot of bald eagles and hawks, abundant hawks. They're constantly hunting. If you're really lucky, you might see an owl in some of these trees.
Welcome back to Bartell's Backroads. We're taking you along on some of California's most unusual guided tours. Up next, we're gonna head to San Diego to hop aboard the amphibious Seal Boat. It's a ride that takes you through downtown before splashing into the bay. When Spanish explorer Juan Cabrillo discovered San Diego Bay in 1542, it took him days to explore the surrounding area.
2, 1, sea lions!
But now, tourists can explore the bay in just under 2 hours by taking the Seal Tour.
You suppose Juan Cabrillo, he really would have liked to have this vessel instead of this one when he rolled in here?
I think it would have helped him out.
Not to be confused with a World War II duck boat, the Seal Tour, which stands for Sea and Land, is a custom 39-foot-long amphibious vehicle that holds over 40 passengers.
This is called a Hydroterra. It's designed for the road and the water, and we're the only ones in San Diego that do this.
Tour guide Dan Strobar gives one of the most versatile tours of San Diego, which takes you through the picturesque and historic streets, right before splashing down in the waters of the bay.
This is the one chance you might get carsick and seasick?
Very good. Yes, you're right. That could happen.
Motion sickness is not really a problem for most riders. The Seal Tour moves about 5 miles an hour in the calm waters of the bay, and there's plenty to look at in the open-air seating.
Now, here we go. We've got a tremendous amount of sea lions here on the left.
Despite being called seal tours, you're more likely to see sea lions instead of their smaller and quieter cousin, the seal. How big are we talking?
Well, we're talking, there's a couple of them over here, 500, 600 pounds. And they'll eat 5% of their weight in fish every day.
Really?
So they'll eat that, and then they'll go into like a fish coma, and they'll sleep for 15 to 18 hours.
San Diego Bay attracts all sorts of aquatic life because Point Loma acts as sort of a shield from the open ocean.
We got some what are these? The blackbirds?
The cormorants, they're members of the penguin family. They're very good divers.
Penguin family?
Yeah.
Along with wildlife, the calm waters in the bay also attract military ships and sailboats. That's why explorer Juan Cabrillo anchored here in 1542. In fact, a replica of Cabrillo's ship, the San Salvador, still tours the bay today.
So if we were here in 1542, this is what we would see.
Of course, though, the bay looks much different and deeper.
The original harbor, the maximum depth would be 15 feet. Right now we're in about 20, 25 feet of water. The channel over here has 60 feet of water. This island over here is all made from the dredging of the harbor.
Juan Cabrillo died just a few months after discovering San Diego Bay, but thanks to his maps, other explorers were able to turn the city of San Diego into what it is today. Fresh trails and wide open views make this one of California's newest outdoor playgrounds. Dos Rios State Park lets you pedal along the meeting of two rivers where nature and a little backroads adventure flow together.
I love being out here, especially just being able to walk out here by myself and seeing all the trees sway and hearing all the birds. You truly feel like you're disconnected from anything outside of this. So there aren't any cars here. All you really hear is the sounds of nature.
Just 12 miles outside of Modesto, where the Tuolumne and the San Joaquin River meet, is California's newest state park, Dos Rios.
So it's called Dos Rios because we have the confluence of the two rivers, right? Dos Rios in Spanish is two rivers.
Dos Rios is now one of the largest state parks in the Central Valley, spanning 1,600 acres, most of which is not accessible with a car.
The fastest way to see it all is on two wheels.
Yeah, and this would be my preferred method.
Ali Monzo is a bilingual interpreter at Dos Rios. The state park may be new, but Ali is very familiar with the land.
I actually started my journey at Dos Rios back in 2015, so almost 10 years ago. I used to volunteer for the Tuolumne River Trust and work pretty closely with river partners. So I actually planted some of the native trees that you'll find here in the park today.
Before it was a state park, Dos Rios was a ranch. The crops here grew along the river, blending with the surrounding Stanislaus County almond orchards and hayfields.
Before that, it was a floodplain. And so we are time traveling in a sense that we're going from floodplain to ranch and now back to restored floodplain.
Floodplains are extremely important in the Central Valley. The plants and soil in these areas hold or absorb excess water to prevent flooding in towns and cities.
I guess you're saying this park is kind of like a big sponge.
Exactly, you can think about it like a big sponge. That's a really good way to think about it.
Many farmers remove native plants and grow crops in floodplains because the soil quality is really good, but farmland does not do a good job of holding back floodwaters.
Actually, in this area that we're standing in, it can flood up to 8 feet.
Oh.
So above our heads, it could be as flooded as that.
Reverting the old Dos Rios Ranch farmland back into a floodplain was a 10-year project put on by nonprofits, river partners, and Tuolumne River Trust. Ali helped them plant native trees and grasses in this area, and not only is it absorbing more water, but it's created homes for endangered animals.
The
Riparian brush rabbit.
Riparian brush, it doesn't really roll off the tongue.
We say RBR. There used to be 4 places you could only find the RBR here in California, and now we're the 5th place, Dos Rios.
A whole slew of animals now call Dos Rios home, and when state parks took over the property, they wanted to open it up to locals. which is important because though this area is surrounded by agriculture, the San Joaquin Valley has the lowest number of public green spaces per capita in the entire state.
Specifically here in the Central Valley, there are certain demographics that haven't had access to spaces like this before. And so I feel really lucky to be able to be one of the bilingual interpreters here and to be able to provide guests with an experience. You know, I can translate things into Spanish for them.
As the park grows, biking and hiking trails will expand. Eventually, boat ramps and fishing areas will be added. But if you want to see this park in its rawest form, now is the time to explore. Hey, you're watching Bartell's Backroads. On this episode, we are taking some interesting tours across California. Anything with wheels. Up next, we're heading to Humboldt County's Timber Heritage Tracks, where we're gonna ride the vintage speeder cars through the redwoods. Following the devastating earthquake of 1906, a massive amount of lumber was needed to rebuild San Francisco. And much of that lumber was transported by railroad from the redwood forests in Humboldt County. Felling these massive redwoods and loading them onto trains required tough lumberjacks. The job was not just dangerous, but deadly, and there was no ambulances. There were, however, railroad speeder cars.
Extreme physical labor, extreme danger, and as I mentioned, they would have these crew cars on hand if they had to run somebody back to camp.
From spring to fall, the Timber Heritage Association offers speeder car rides down different sections of Humboldt County's old logging tracks. This particular ride was along Eureka Slough.
At one time, there were 53 independent different railroads.
Tour guide Thaddeus Wu says speeder cars were like the utility vehicles of the tracks. Like their name suggests, speeder cars were not only fast-moving, but fast-acting because they generally ran on gas-powered engines instead of steam.
Steam locomotive, we're talking 4 or 5 hours to come up to steam to be able to get out on the track. Whereas with these gas-powered cars, they can just fire them up and get out there.
The Timber Heritage Association speeder car is actually a crew car, which hauled several workers up to the forest early in the morning so they could cut logs before the steam train arrived.
Traditionally, you'll see speeders are little two-person, very, very short little things.
If you want to see what smaller speeder cars look like, Joseph Oliver will show you one at the Timber Heritage Museum.
You could sit on it like this and operate it from these controls up here, and as long as you keep your feet clear of the tracks, you should be good.
Well, the museum has a whole line of different speeder cars they're restoring, and as primitive and dangerous as they look, speeder cars were much less labor-intensive than hand cars, which were human-powered and very impractical for long-haul distances.
It could be 20 miles, it could be 100. The railroads here were pretty long, and they had a lot of mountainous terrain.
Today, the Timber Heritage speeder cars are limited to the remaining historic tracks, which are only a few miles long, but very scenic. Passengers get a good look at Humboldt Bay, and drivers along Highway 101 get a unique look at the speeder cars.
When we get out there, we're gonna get a lot of honks and a lot of waves.
They're not as big or powerful as a locomotive, but there's something special about cruising along in an open-air speeder car. Tiny engines whine and miniature cars zip around the track at lightning speed. Modesto's slot car raceway turns grown-ups into kids again, one fast lap at a time.
From Gilbert Autorama comes the excitement and competition of the famous Indianapolis Speedway.
If you were a kid and felt the need for speed in the 1960s, 70s, or 80s, you got yourself a slot car racing set from toy makers like Gilbert or Aurora AFX.
Or this slot car raceway, it's the coolest out here.
The little electric-powered toy cars were so popular, even Batman and Robin raced them. Today, the nostalgia of yesteryears lives on at Motown Raceway in Modesto. I can see how this gets very addicting.
Yeah.
Gene Braun's the owner, and when he and his wife bought the place in 2010, their main goal was to give customers a real racing experience.
This kind of racing is as close to real racing as you'll get, because you have to work on the car, you have to prepare. It's a lot of little things. The car has to be good, the body has to be right, the motor has to be good.
So here we go, 1, 2, 3.
Of course, that real racing experience comes at a 1/24th scale of a real race car and track.
Yeah, so this is a hill climb. We got a scaled drag strip, 55 feet. This track's 155 feet.
Slot cars run on an electrified track. That metal slot in the middle sends power to the cars, and drivers need to increase or decrease the power as they round the corner.
Look at Wilbur, try to cheat.
Rules are pretty simple. Races are 3 minutes long, and the driver with the most laps wins.
And we crashed.
And just like any real racing, slot cars require repairs. Good thing Gene has a mechanic shop in the back.
Is there rental insurance you gotta get on these things?
No, we take care of that. We cover it.
Gene may take care of the damage for you, but your accident may end up on display.
It's kind of the Motown Raceway, wall of shame.
Wall of shame.
Yeah.
Cars, two-leg track, race cars.
Slot car racing may have started out as a kid's toy, and it still is, but today, big kids play too.
And I came home and told my dad I wanted to do it, and he said, you better get a job, so I got a paper route so I could start buying slot cars.
John Wilbur's been racing slot cars since he was 12. Since then, he's racked up quite the collection.
And I still have some of those old cars that are worth quite a bit of money.
Driving is just part of the allure of slot car racing. Building and showing off your cars is pretty important too.
This one, I was getting ready to do the wheelie bars on this. We changed the tires. Tires got old.
John Tevis prides himself on the craftsmanship of his racers, but if his cars were full-sized, he might go broke building them.
These are a little cheaper than maybe the real thing, I think.
Absolutely, yeah, way more affordable.
The style and look of a vehicle is a big part of slot car racing, but if you ask me, the styles can sometimes be a little odd.
What do we got here? Is this like the funny car section?
So this is called an ABC car, anything but a car. So you have Superman, a head with a hand, a blade, a coffin.
Scorpion, you got a boat over here?
Boat.
Talk about real, just listen.
Only AFX has magnifying.
One has 7, 2 has 8.
Slot car racing has changed a lot over the years, but one thing remains true, at least at Motown Racing. There's always been an odd need for speed on these little electric tracks. Hey, thanks for watching Bartell's Backroads and taking a little ride with me as we check out some of the most unusual tours in California. I hope it's inspired you to take a little road trip of your own. I'm John Bartell. Hope to see you on the Backroads.